Welcome to Artful Aging with your host, Amy. Are you a senior or a caregiver of a senior looking for support and direction? Best-selling author, educator, and expert in senior living, Amy Friesen is here with the help you need while providing you with an important and valuable support network. So now, please welcome the host of Artful Aging, Amy Friesen.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Amy Friesen, and this is Artful Aging with Amy. We're live from Bold Brave TV, and today I'm joined with Marc, an author and keynote speaker on advocacy and aging. What is advocacy, some of you may say? Advocacy is acting in favor of or supporting another person. As many of you have now been exposed to since COVID, advocacy for our seniors is so important, and many families do advocate. Yet some families are still trying to find the balance of when and how much advocacy to do as to not step on their loved one's toes. At no time in the past have we had such an influx of seniors, though, in our population, especially in Canada. We're at about 7 million seniors, 65 plus. So this influx will disrupt what we already know, and many companies will have to play catch up. The government will have to play catch up, which leaves these spaces where things can fall through the cracks. Being an advocate for your senior loved one is one way to help circumvent these serious issues. After a successful career launching and commercializing innovations in telecom and entrepreneurial startups, Marc turned his attention to the challenges of financial and personal care management for elders. He has helped many families, including his own, plan for and deal with the inevitable changes in life and aging as they begin. Sorry for the tongue twister. Welcome, Marc. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm really happy to have you on today.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for putting these shows on. It's a great set of content for the community, and especially the aging community. I've listened to many of them, and congratulations again. It's phenomenal, and thank you for having me.
Well, thank you, and that's what Artful Aging is all about, as you and I were talking about. It's about bringing pieces of information all together on one platform so people can pick and choose what they need. So, Marc, maybe we could start by telling us more about your own journey and how you decided to write and speak on advocacy. And again, I haven't said this yet, but Marc's book is Advocacy and Aging, which is available on Marc's website, but he'll tell us a little bit more. Marc?
Yeah, so thank you. The journey was an interesting one, and really it goes back to, I've always had an interest in financial planning, estate planning, not as much when you're young, but as you get older. But my father-in-law, when he retired, got really passionate about estate planning and read a lot of books, and he shared some of it. In hindsight, probably not as much. And, you know, I believe very much in open conversation. We'll talk more about that, but probably more than the average. But in hindsight, what he did not plan for is to lose his mind. And as he lost his mind, he started, for control's sake, everyone seemed to want to keep control and not share the management and so on. It started simplifying things and changing things, and some of the things that had done very well. And it's only one day when we uncovered that he actually sold an asset. I won't get into the details, for 5 cents on a dollar. And we said, oh my goodness. And really, he was trying to do the right thing, remove the burden from the family and so on. But that was not a good thing. And we had, at that point, recognized, we knew he was early in dementia, but we recognized it was time to get involved. So up to that point, and that really opened my eyes, because if he had planned for those circumstances, I would have assumed that most of the population didn't. So I got more interested in the subject, got in social conversation, got proactively engaged with my parents, and that turned out to be a really, really positive experience. And then really I started wearing my own. And as I was planning, I realized that my criteria were very clear. I was planning for what happens if I lose my mind, what happens if I lose control. I need to find a way to hand it over, which most people don't think of proactively. And so that's a bit of the story. And over time, I developed a framework. The crux, but that tells me how I got engaged and developed the framework. The book came about when on my 60th birthday, yes, I'm over 60, someone gave me a book. It's Willing Wisdom by Tom Deans, which really great read. I would recommend it to anybody. Simple read. I jumped into it, and it was about open communication, but it was more dealing for after death and how you openly communicate about your wishes for how your estate is to be distributed. And I really, really liked that book. And I kind of said, wow, I'm merely focused on the living year while he's focused on the after situation. And I said, I could probably write a book. And I got in touch with Tom by circumstance, and over a few conversations, he not only encouraged me, gave me some very important hints. And at one point, I basically said, if I don't do this, I'll always regret it. So that's how I started writing the book. And it's a process, and it's been a phenomenal journey. And I still learn. It's a journey that's going to continue. I still learn every day about something new, and about how important and how significant this new economy and reality is, and what people are facing.
I'm curious to know, when things were going on with your dad, did you have that kind of balancing act that I was mentioning at the first? Like, when do I step in? Obviously he's got his background, his education, things like that, that was going on in his life, and then things start to change, like you said, with his cognitive. Did you have that balancing act of like, okay, now, oh, wait, not now? Did that come across?
Well, it was with my father-in-law, and that's even more, it was more difficult because it's not my father. And at one point I talked to my wife, and she, I kind of said, we've known that your dad's degrading, but when you get involved, and I did approach him very quietly. At one point we were visiting, they live in 4 hours away and don't see them often. And I told him, I said, when is it that you decide that you don't have the capability of driving? And it was an interesting conversation. And I'm not sure whether that had an impact, but he started realizing and opening a conversation. And it's when that next event where he sold that particular asset that, kind of everyone woke up. And at that point, fortunately, he was very open. My mother-in-law, which actually had dementia, both of them had dementia, which makes it even worse. That they were open, but not all the case. In my family situation, actually, my mom was very aggressive and then in defiance. So that's another story we may talk about later. So, but it's you do, and in my book, I do talk about how to do the transition gradually, and really, if you start early, you can build the trust in the relationship, and it's a kind of a wonderful thing if you do it right.
I find that a lot of people, we're, again, for the audience that watches us, we're all about planning and pre-planning and making sure you're prepared. A lot of people don't want to take that step until the step is maybe too late. So that's difficult for a lot of, like, my clients. It's even in my family. But let's continue this conversation after the break, Mac. When we come back, we will continue the conversation, and we're going to talk a little bit about misconceptions and what advocacy in aging is. You're watching Artful Aging with Amy on Bold Brave TV.
Artful Aging with Amy is currently looking for guests and show ideas for our next season. Drop us a line at hello@artfulagingwithamy.com and let us know what you would like to learn about in our upcoming season.
Welcome back. Mac is joining us today. We're having a look at advocacy and aging, and we're going to take a bit of a deeper dive. Now, one way to look at advocacy is in a large group of people advocating to make change, but there's also people like Sally's mom and Esther's mom and all of these people that are trying to advocate for their loved ones to make sure that their care needs are met, to make sure their financial needs are met, and all the rest. And so, Mac, could you please tell us a little bit more about what advocacy and aging means?
Yeah, well, let me start by first saying that when I started writing the book and trying to put my thoughts together in a framework and crystallize the framework, I was not actually focused on advocacy, nor the concept of building a team around you. And what I realized as I was putting the pieces together are a few things. So first of all, is that the basic premise of the book was that we're going to live longer. And as we live longer, you're going to have degraded capability. And whether we like it or not, and most people don't like to think of that concept, then you're going to need some support and help. And if you kind of listen to the standard recommendations, people say, well, you're going to go to your decision maker, which is the person that you would have named in your power of attorney, whether it's power of attorney for property and so on. And a lot of that is limited to that. But really, as you work through and talk to people and so on and so forth, there's two things that really stand out. First of all, you're going to need probably more help than you think. There's going to be more transitions than you think. And most important, there's a lot of people that want to help you. You've built in your life, communities around you, families around you, and people don't realize that people are willing to help. So as you go through a process of planning, and planning takes more than just the financial focus, it takes the healthcare focus, the house care focus, and so on and so forth. So the concept is to build fundamentally a community around you. And I actually have eventually introduced the concept of 5 sub-teams that become advocates, and you can nurture, obviously starting with who are your delegates, your legal delegates, whether it's your executors, your power of attorneys, and so on and so forth.
Well, and I think that it's interesting that you said that, we all have people around us, generally speaking, that care for us, that want to see the best for us. And I think that that's one of the misconceptions. We're going to talk about the other ones in just a second, but one of the misconceptions I find is that a lot of seniors that we work with at Tea and Toast actually feel like there's no one around, that they're being a burden, that they don't want to ask. And I feel like that is the complete opposite from my own knowledge point of view. Do you agree, Marc? And what are some of the other misconceptions that you've learned?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And it's a subject that it's very difficult for people historically, especially in the prior generation. I think it's improving with the next generation, but people didn't want to talk about money. It's a taboo subject, and you don't want to disturb the people. The other thing is, and this I'm seeing day in and day out, and I'm actually quite surprised about it, and how people avoid talking about death, avoid talking about degradation or critical illness. Those scenarios, people don't want. It's very, very difficult. I'm part of a group called Compassion in Ottawa, who we actually do a workshop for an hour and a half. And I was stunned, an hour and a half just to open a conversation. So really, the misconception is you shouldn't talk about it. It's exactly the opposite. And the misconception is people really are open. People want to help. So the difficult part is to find a trigger to get it started. Okay. And really, I'm going to say to people, just find the right opportunity to open a conversation. In the case of my parents, I kind of was worried through my life that whether they have the means, especially if they live long. And at 88 and 84, they were still kicking pretty strong and having an active life and living in the countryside and so on. And one day they said, we have sold our place and we're going to move to the city. And I said, uh-oh, because to me, the house was a buffer, an equity buffer should there be not enough money. And I had no idea the situation, but they had a humble life, so I didn't know there's enough. That was the trigger. So I used that and started a conversation. And it was interesting. My dad was really open, and it really started building a strong relationship, a new kind of relationship with my parents that was very good. My mom was a little bit more resistant, and it was interesting because at one point I said, listen, I'd like to help you in the planning, but really I'm doing my own planning and I need to know whether I'll need to subsidize you. And all of that changed the whole situation, and we move forward. So I'm not saying that's the same trigger for everybody, but find a trigger to start the conversation. It's hard, but for a lot of people, but once you have it, then it's a wonderful experience. And I could say I've had such a good feeling and good time to build a new relationship and get to know my parents from another angle and get closer to them. So it's been great.
I think it's interesting that you said too about how you're planning yours or you need to know theirs, right? So there's lots of people, myself included, that have parents, obviously, that that are going to be seniors eventually, or are seniors now, and there's the generation below that are looking at, okay, do I need to extend money or care or services or time to my loved ones as they age. What does it look like? But the problem is that a lot of us are putting this puzzle together in the dark. And so even, Mike and I, we have 3 parents that we're in the back of our mind planning for, but we have very limited information. And I think using any of that type of information to open the doors is valuable, but also to know, and I would like to know if you agree, that, one conversation to open a door might not open the door the whole way. And so to kind of hang in there and do it respectfully, but maybe have to open that door a couple of times. Did you find that?
I more than agree. In fact, as I started opening the conversation, I knew it was going to be a journey. I didn't know how long. The financial process to get a baseline, and I'm not even talking about a very complex baseline, was about 6 months, where I could say, and honestly, if I would have had the data, I could have probably done it in 2 days. But it was a concept of going at the pace of their ability to accept the information, to work the information. We also had to build and evolve the relationship with their financial advisor, because there's a few things that need to be changed, and so on. And they honestly trusted their financial advisor, and they need to build the trust into me and my siblings in order to make that transition. But yeah, it's a long process, and it's important to go very carefully and very methodically.
For sure. And there's also folks that have had trusted certain professionals throughout their lives, like doctors and stuff, that things change, right? And sometimes whoever they're dealing with doesn't actually have a full picture, and therefore we need to look at it a little bit different. But let's take a break, Mac, and after the break, we're going to continue this conversation. Go grab a cup of tea, stretch your legs. You're watching Artful Aging with Amy on Bold Brave TV.
If you're a planner or trying to be one, Things You Should Know is a great place to start. Personal information, power of attorney info, and real estate is just a fraction of the information you can store in this fillable planner and record keeper. Download your free copy today at teaandtoast.ca/medical-planner to get started.
Hello, and thanks for joining us again. Marc is an author of Advocacy and Aging, as you can see here, and there's a link to his book on artfulagingwithamy.com. And advocacy for our loved one is such an important conversation, as you're either learning or already. Marc, could you maybe give us some more information about your book? What's the main issue that you're addressing in the book?
Yes, the whole book started by, as I mentioned earlier, the concept that we're going to live longer, and we all need to accept that there's going to be degradation in capabilities. And with that, you're going to need help and support, which is kind of not natural. We all have to remember that we were born, and then we built the skills to fly by our own wings and have our own independence. And now we're talking about taking away that and handing it over. And that's not a concept that, most people are proud to have, flown by their own wings and, done whatever they've done in life and built whatever they've built. And now you're going to again hand it over, because you have to admit that you may not be as capable as you are, or your children or your spouse are better positioned than you. So it's a hard concept to do. So when you start and accepting that reality, and you start planning accordingly, then it helps. So the book is about putting the framework that says, what do you need to plan for as you age? And it puts in the end, I've now discovered it's kind of an umbrella. It's an umbrella that addresses all the areas that you need to address while you're aging, and puts a set of principles and criteria so that when you go in more depth in each of those areas, and it's about financial planning, it's about legal, it's about organizing, it's about transitioning. I don't go deep in all. There's lots of books and experts on financial planning. There's lots of experts on legal, but it's a set of principle that says you need to worry about these areas, and you need to do your homework, and this is what you need to look for when you have those areas. And we'll talk a little bit more in the next section about what I mean in certain those areas. But it's very important. And what I find out is there's a lot of experts and books on each of the topics, but there's not a set of principle and an overall map that guides you to where you need to go. So that's fundamentally the book. And through that book, as I mentioned earlier, it became very clear there's a lot of open communications that have to be had, and you need to involve people and build relationships that will fundamentally end up being your team that's going to support you through the life transitions.
I think a lot of what people don't understand is that, like you said, they're going to a stage in life where they may not have as much control, especially if it's a cognitive issue, and they might be losing different controls in their life that they're not wanting to do. Like you said, no one's proud to do that. But what we try to tell the community, and what I'm doing with Artful Aging, is to tell people that, if you plan, then it will be your choice. If you don't plan, it won't be your choice. I want to say black and white, because it sort of is. It's like, if you can make a plan and educate your team and your family on what you want, most often the family and the team are going to follow the plan as you go, and therefore you will have choice. But the people that stick their head in the sand, they're the ones that end up not having choice. We had a client that called us the other day that wanted to move to a retirement home, but when we started asking her some questions of information that we need to do the process properly, what the retirement home might need for information, she said, no, I don't want to divulge anything. I don't want anybody to know anything. I will wait until I'm in a critical spot in the hospital, and then they will send me to a retirement home. And for professionals like ourselves, it's jaw-dropping, although not uncommon. And it's just like that amount of people that don't want people to know what their business is. And it's unfortunate, because if they actually would just do a plan, then people could help them, and they wouldn't get in a situation where they feel like things are being taken away from them. What about life transitions, Marc? What kind of life transitions should seniors contemplate when they're kind of looking at what to plan, I guess?
Well, I think that, I think it's different for everybody, but what's clear is there will be life transitions, okay? And there's a book I particularly was inspired with early on in my journey by Katie Butler. It's called The Art of Dying, and she's much more focused on the healthcare side and the support that you need through that. But she typically has 4 or 5 phases there where you go from total independence to partial independence to ultimately end of care life in palliative care. And when you look at, you kind of realize there are some gradual steps, and in those steps you will need different support from people around you, whether it's emotional or actually very tangible actions. You may and likely will need to have some home transition, and whether it's changing your own home or going retirement home or nursing home or palliative care and all of that. So it's not black and white, and not everyone goes through all the phases, and not everyone, the same duration, but there are those kinds of life transition, and you need to be cognitive of those. As you said, you need to communicate your wishes and your values and beliefs so that whoever's around you, especially if you lose your cognitive skills, we're able to support you properly according to your wishes, not how other people would like to do it. In the end, this is all about in the planning. I really like you keep bringing everyone on your show about the planning and the preparation, and it's all about if you plan and you have a clear view of knowing that you're organized and you have a team around you, then you could live with peace of mind and really maximize the quality of life through all those life transition. And really that's what it's all about. We're entering, people that are aging here are entering a journey, and everyone deserves a quality of life, whatever state. We don't like to contemplate being degraded from where we are today, but we all deserve, and you want quality of life for everybody.
Yeah, and I hope that, as generations age, everybody gets more used to understanding that there's transitions, because a lot of the seniors we work with right now who don't want to plan, they stick their head in the sand. They say, well, I'm going to go out feet first. It's like, well, that's not really a plan. That probably generally doesn't happen. I don't know the stats on how many people just kind of drop dead and that's it. And, they're healthy 1 minute and they're gone. Probably doesn't happen that often. And, a lot of people are hedging their bets on that plan. And, it's all we can do to say, it's not quite a plan. Let's make a better plan, right? So is there anything that seniors and caregivers can look for if they feel like an advocacy issue has come up, or anything that they can look for planning purposes?
I'm not sure I fully understand the question, but I do believe one of the things, a lot of people focus on the financial side. I think people need to start thinking of the healthcare side a lot more. And I particularly am a proponent of going to do a healthcare directive. Some people call it a living will or advanced care. And I think that that's not an easy process. But if you could open a conversation on that topic, all of a sudden it forces you to think through of scenarios that from scenarios that you need to think about. And it's even hard, even if you kind of say, even if you're on a diagnostic, people that had a critical illness diagnostic will tell you how difficult it is to crystallize their wishes. But the more I don't want everyone to spend all their time there, but if you spend some time to do so, and eventually start opening the conversation, opening it with other people, you'll find that eventually your own values and belief gets crystallized, and that really helps you plan and decide for what may be the care you want.
Sure. Okay, well, Mac, we're going to take a break. We're going to continue the conversation when we come back. You're watching Artful Aging with Amy. We'll see you in a few.
Are you watching us on YouTube but would rather listen to us in the car or on a walk? No problem. Artful Aging with Amy is also available as a podcast. Head over to artfulagingwithamy.com for the links.
Welcome back to Artful Aging with Amy. I'm your host, Amy Friesen, and today we're talking about advocacy in aging with Marc Seguin. Marc, could you tell us a little bit more about Advocacy in Aging, your book, about the 5 pillars that you have in here?
Yes, in the end, as I went through the whole thought process of what do we have to plan for during the aging years, or for the aging years, I should say, I ended up summarizing and structuring the book based on 5 pillars. So I'm going to briefly go through them. There's some words in the title that are very important, but you may not pick it up right away, but I'm going to try to bring it alive and so that you get a good sense of it. The first one is about financial management and planning, but it says structure your financial plan to enable transition. So the word structure is very important. And what I've uncovered is there's a lot of financial advisors, a lot of financial planners. Some of them are investment advisors rather than planners, and so on. But I've not often seen someone structured in a way that is simple for everyone to understand and be able to use that as an approach. And I use an approach called the 3 allotment approach, which is very simple. One allotment is about what you need to live until the planning cycle. So if you plan to 90 or 95, which is pretty much standard these days, there is then the second allotment, which is people are afraid of not having enough, but if you do a proper plan, you'll be able to put your assets and the necessary part of your net worth that will cover those exceptional circumstances, exceptional health care, living too long or long, it's never too long, I would say, and so on. And then the one that's magical to me is the third allotment. For some people that have managed to build more of a network is what you'll never need. And no one ever openly structures that way. But I really like that because once you see that picture, you get a very clear view and it gives you comfort. But also, especially if you have extra, then it lets you think about, okay, this is the inheritance, or this is what I want to give to charity, or this is what I work for. And you could start now thinking of doing it while you're alive. So why not gift to charity and enjoy that and participate in it? Why not give the inheritance early to your kid? But people don't tend or aren't comfortable with it unless you have a clear picture. It also, that structure allows an easy transition. So if you talk high level to your power of attorneys and your family, here's the big picture, and then the details could work themselves. So I talk about a lot that, and and I also put a big emphasis on a financial plan is not just an investment plan. It encompasses budgets, objective, and so on and so forth. So number 1. Number 2 pillar is about the legal foundation. Aaron McNamara did a great job in one of your prior episodes to go in some of the details. I really focus, and the title has the word activate in there, and activate now. It also talks about healthcare directive. what I found out is that in too many cases, and especially in the living year, it's not as much of a problem with wills, but for the power of attorney, they're either not in place or they're not activated. And people think, well, this is a legal document, it'd be easy, but I'm going to tell you, it's work to put in place and make your power of attorney active. And what I mean by that is you may find out, like when I went through it, my parents, it took me about 9 months to 12 months. I was not going at a fast pace, but but by the time you find out all the institutions and the organizations that need to have your power of attorney, each one of them have their approval process, and some of them actually, especially banks, may not recognize the power of attorney and go through the process. And if the person can't be there to attest that yes, you are the delegate, then it could be a long process, which in some cases could be problematic. So I encourage people to activate it and activate it now. For some people, that's scary. If I say my son have access to everything, oh, well, I can't do that. Well, why not? Well, I'm not sure I trust them. Well, what if you fall on your head tomorrow and you're in a coma? You trust them now to manage their affairs. So to me, I know it's not the norm. I know that it's not comfortable for people to do that, but I spent a lot of time in that pillar to talk about the need to put the legal foundation but more so to do it now. I also put an emphasis, as I said earlier, on the healthcare directive. So that's kind of pillar 2. Pillar 3, again, was covered very well by Giselle Grenier Miller in one of our previous segments, which it's about simplifying, organizing, downsizing. We've spent all our life accumulating assets and goods. It's part of our quality of life, but really we're not using necessarily all. Especially as you age, you may not need as big a home, or the cottage may become a burden, so on. So how do you slowly, it doesn't have to be done overnight, but how to slowly downsize and so on. And ultimately, and most important, is to document. And I know, Amy, you've got a great organizer and on your website that says how do you document everything. I think the documentation is critical. And I'm going to tell you, my personal criteria and approach is I want if something happened to me within 24 hours, I want people to be whether it's my wife, my kids, to be operational. I don't want them to be looking for information. I don't want them to be scrambling to get approval to access the information and so on and so forth. I basically want them to operate, and that's part of how I document, also how I communicate, so they know how organized. But it's easier done if you also simplify and downsize and so on. So that's the third pillar. Fourth and fifth are fairly obvious. The fourth is about how to gradually transition the management of your financials and your estate. And the fifth one is the healthcare. And nearly you do that in phases. With my parents, fundamentally, we opened the communication, worked on the plan together. Eventually, I started shadowing my dad and had quarterly review. And eventually, I took over some part of the investments. And gradually. And one day, my dad had a mild stroke and said, I trust you know better than me. You're more capable. And he basically says, you do it. And so you do that in phases, and it ends up working great. So that's a summary of the 5 pillars. And with that, I create 5 sub-teams that get built over that period of time.
I think people don't realize, as you're talking about too, that it's a massive undertaking for someone to step into somebody else's shoes, right? It's, we're lost, and that's what you're trying to do, and what I'm trying to do is give people direction and tools so that you could step easier into those. But you have to have participation for the person's shoes that you're stepping into. And so anything that you can do to help these people is better. I mean, we speak with a lot of executives as well, and it's a nightmare, right? Like, it's a long, long process. It's very involved. So just to have those extra things in place would make things much easier. After the break, Mac and I are going to speak about top tips for people in their senior years, and I want to know if Marc's implemented his own advice. We'll be back in a minute on Artful Aging with Amy.
Are you in need of retirement living but unsure where to begin? At retirementhomeadvisors.ca, we have brought senior living advisors together from all over Canada to help families navigate the senior living industry. For more information, book a call with one of our advisors today.
Welcome back to Artful Aging with Amy. I hope you had time to get a stretch and a tea or a coffee. We're talking with Marc about advocacy and aging. We're going to look for some tips for people who are entering their senior years. But I have to ask, Marc, now that you're a young guy, tell me, have you implemented your suggestions from advocacy and aging? Because although I implement a lot of what I do into my life, there are definitely still things on my to-do list. So how is your to-do list?
Yeah, well, thank you for asking. And, I will be honest in my answer here. Let me first speak about, yes, I've implemented it. Let's talk about my parents. And my parents pretty much became a bit of the benchmark for the framework, because as I said earlier in the call, I was first had an eye opener through my in-laws, and this is where I kind of said, I'm going to go be proactive with my parents, and it was a great process. And I'm going to say that most of the book tells a story about my parents through each of the pillars. It tells stories about other people also, but fundamentally, I would say I've implemented most, if not all, of that for my parents. The part that I'm a little weak is on the healthcare directive. By the time that it was, we had the opportunity to, or we should have had the discussion, it was probably too late. My mom was well into dementia, and my dad is getting older, and it's a difficult conversation. It was kind of interesting because at Thanksgiving last year, when he had read the book, he said to me, "Have we done everything in the book?" I said, "Well, most of it, but we're a little weak on the healthcare directive." And we actually had a conversation. I actually learned a lot from that conversation. I got the most out of it, but it's not as far as I'd like. But my benchmark is pretty high on that one, so that's good. Let's talk about me. For sure, my financial planning process is, I would say, in good shape. It took a long time, even though I knew where I was going and so on, to get the answers on those 3 allotments, to get the clarity I was looking, to be able to communicate to the broader group of my family, or the group I want to talk to, in a way that everyone can understand without getting into complex spreadsheet, which a lot of investors do, and curves and so on. It's very simple, but easy to communicate. So that's good. In terms of the communication process, I'm early days. It's going to be a process that's going to take a while, so that I get to a point where my delegates will be able to operate exactly as I am. But I've started the conversation. The legal foundation is there. It's been shared openly with my children. The healthcare directive has been shared. In fact, my son, often you're used to it. It's, "Oh, you're getting old. This is what you said we should do." So we went on a ski trip. He says, "Oh, you got a pain in your back there. You don't like those things. Well, we're going to act on your healthcare directive now." So that's underway, but I don't think they understand and feel it as much. So it's going to be an ongoing communication process and so on. The organizing, this has become a philosophy of mine. Yes, I think that within 24 hours, my wife or anyone will find the documents. They are aware. They've seen all the documents. It's probably more detailed than anyone would want. But I found out that as you go and you put yourself in the mode that tomorrow I won't be there and someone's got to figure this out, and you kind of say, "Well, I need to document this way, or I need to simplify." So I'm saying I'm pretty organized, but there's still a lot to do in terms of communication. So I think I'm early days in the communications. I'm early days in transitions. I am putting in place, like on the financial transition, the POAs with financial institution, give my delegates, including my kids, the rights to all of this. People think I'm a little crazy, but I've built the trust, and I'm building trust. On the healthcare, very interesting. I've actually shared my healthcare directive with my doctor, and unfortunately through COVID, it was hard to have some live interaction. But one thing that was kind of interesting was that after I sent her the document, 3 months later I had an appointment, and she said to me, "Do you mind if I share your document with my colleagues?" And I said to her, "Tell me why." And she says, "Well, I've never seen something so simple, so clear before. I've seen others, but this is clear, and I really understand your wishes, and I think we all should adopt that." I said, "Well, But before you share it, I need to tell you that there's a book that comes with this. The book had not been released, so eventually I sent her the book, and we had the next conversation. But it was really telling to me that, and my goal in my healthcare directive was not only to communicate my wishes, but make it easy for someone else to understand, so that, in a circumstance that there's a bit of controversy around the healthcare directive. If it's not clear, then there's then debates within family, even with medical questioning. This was, I guess, my healthcare directive is pretty good in that respect, and that's something I worked towards. So that was really good. So that's kind of summary where I'm at, and I've got myself a 5 to 8 year or a horizon, so that I really feel that at least with my core family and the key people that I want as part of my advocates, that they've gone to the next level of depth. So it's all in place. It started the communications process, but it's an ongoing process.
I think it's an interesting spot to point out as well that because of your background, you have X amount organized, and because of my background, I have X amount organized. So, and we're professionals in what we do, but we still don't have it all together. And so for people who are not professionals in these types of fields, even more reason to plan early, because we actually know the direction and the path. It might be a time thing, it might be a process thing for us, but there's a lot of people who don't even know what path they're on. And so that's even more reason to start planning ahead and trying to organize things even before you think that you need it. What's the reaction to your book been, Marc?
Oh, I'm going to tell you, it's been quite gratifying because you never know if you communicate clearly whether it's a subject people like and so on. Everyone that's read the book has literally taken an action within days of reading the book, and I have enough of a sample to know that that's the case. And it was particularly pleasing when there's some people that are lawyers and my own financial advisor and his wife actually ended up changing their plan, going to the lawyer. Not only everyone has taken tangible actions, but some people that you would have thought are very, very organized. So that's been gratifying to me, and that's the goal, is to share the wisdom, share the approach, so that more people get organized. And I'll briefly mention one of the biggest. It's not a word, but an observation is, if you don't plan, I've seen that. Often the consequences are a lot of family rift. And I've seen it over and over in all the stories I've lived through. And that's kind of what I'm avoiding. So the book was a great reception. People are acting interesting. People usually zoom in on one approach. They don't grasp the umbrella. So I have a checklist at the end of every pillar. So I recommend people go back, because you really zoomed in one part, but you missed the other because it opened your eyes on that part, but don't miss out on the others.
Well, Marc, I'm hoping that today's conversation has been really good for all of our viewers. It's been definitely eye-opening for me as well. I want to thank you for coming on again. This has been terrific. So thanks so much for joining us today.
And thank you for having me, and thank you for putting these episodes. I think it's important for the next generation to plan, and really also our children. My children are not even organized for their own stage of life, and even though we're focused on aging, this applies for everybody. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, after the break, we're going to go over my top tips from today for those folks who love the Coles Notes version. You're watching Artful Aging with Amy here on Bold Brave TV.
Are you and your family considering senior living options, but you're not quite sure where to start? In my best-selling book, Breadcrumbs Piecing Together the Retirement Living Industry, you will find tips and strategies for navigating the entire journey. Whether you're needing help with understanding the basics or strategies to help a loved one with dementia, it's all inside. Head over to teaandtoast.ca/ebook to pick up your copy today.
Welcome back to Artful Aging with Amy. We're speaking with Marc today about advocacy on aging. I hope that you did enjoy today. If you would like a link to Marc's book, please head over to artfulagingwithamy.com. There's a link for the book as well as his bio. Also, what Marc was mentioning was our booklet for planning, which is on the Tea and Toast site, and there's a link for that on Artful Aging as well. Let's go over a couple of top tips for advocating for your loved one. So my top tip is really to observe and check in often. There's a lot of seniors that don't want to bother people. There's a lot of seniors that don't want to say anything. It doesn't even have to be specifically a senior. If you think something's going on and that somebody could use an extra voice, an extra person to help, ideally, if you're checking in often to show them that you care, that will open up a little bit more of that communication that Marc was talking about. Number two, if you need to have, if it's needed, help one of your loved ones assess the care that they're getting on a regular basis. People's care needs change all the time, and they may need more care, or they actually may need less care if they're getting better. And so it's always important that if there's healthcare folks involved, like PSWs or support workers, and you're hiring a company, or you're getting it from a retirement home, or you're bringing in the public care, always try to look at what the care is coming in and evaluate whether you need it, whether that person would need it still, or they need more or less, because there's also value on both sides. If they need more care, let's get the care in so that they're safe. But also, if they need less care, let's maybe look at a plan to take away some care so they remain independent and they can retain that. I think that's just as important at times. Number three, don't be afraid to say something. As I said, people don't tell their loved ones a lot about what's going on. They tell me all the time that they're having issues with providers and they don't feel that they can say anything. And so a lot of seniors are actually having issues with somebody, with a provider, with someone that's giving care, and they don't want to say anything. We get that with other businesses as well. They have a problem, but they're afraid to say something. And so going back to, if you're checking in often, you're going to be at the first of that issue, hopefully that you can rectify it quickly. So don't be afraid to say something. My outlook is, as long as you are respectful and you ask them if you can give them opinion, usually that'll open up a conversation, and people won't get their back up as much, as opposed to just saying, hey, mom, I feel like this, or hey, mom, and they're coming at them. We always tell our clients at Tea and Toast, make room for the conversation. Let your loved one know that you have concerns and that you would like to speak to them about it. Don't be afraid to open that door. And there you have it. So on next week's show, we're going to talk about brain health and nutrition. Again, if you're looking for resources, head over to artfulagingwithamy.com. You'll find links to everything there. If you've enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends, like us on YouTube or Facebook, and help get the word out of artfulagingwithamy.com. I almost feel like we should call it the planning show. So from me to all of you, I hope that you have a wonderful Wednesday, and we're live on Bold Brave TV every week. Take care.
You've been listening to Artful Aging with host Amy. Many folks just like you feel they're alone in their journey in helping a loved one or caregiver. So tune in each week and let Amy show you that help is around the corner and is just one conversation away. Here on Artful Aging.